Namaskar, this is Rima and today I am going to discuss briefly about the Garhgaon school of Assamese illustrated manuscripts. So before moving ahead, I would like to thank Abhijna E-Museum for providing this virtual space to talk about this exquisite royal court art practices of the Ahoms. So from the last decade of the 17th century, an aristocratic court art developed in the Ahom royal court for documenting the royal events, pageantry and personalities of the court, along with the religious and spiritual narratives adhering to their ideologies. Confined to the royal court, it was probably an attempt by the Ahom kings to document the intellectual history of that period. So, emulating the norms of the court paintings, like that of the Mughals, the nobles of the Kangra valley, or the Rajputs, the Ahom also started this tradition from the days of King Rudra Singha, which is in the late 17th century, and later it was developed by Siva Singha in the 18th century. So art historians Rajatananda Dasgupta and R.D. Chaudhary have broadly discussed this royal school of illustrated manuscripts of Assam as Garhgaon school or Garhgaon style, deriving the name from the traditional Ahom capital Garhgaon. So King Rudra Singha, Siva Singha, and the queens Phuleswari, Ambika Devi, Sarbeswari had immense contributions for maturing and development of this style. The Ahoms already maintained the tradition of keeping both genealogical or other official records through Buranjis. Interestingly, they never commissioned to illustrate the Buranjis. However, in Shankachura Vadha, Rudra Singha had been depicted accepting homage from the Jayantya and the Kachari kings. Few folios of Brahmavaivarta Purana also contain the genealogy of the patron Purandar Singha, starting from Rudra Singha. The manuscripts were largely executed on the bark of the aguru or sachi tree, known as sachipat, and on finely polished surfaces made out of pressed cotton, known as tulapat. For the illustrations, the color palette of the artist comprised of 5 primary colors instead of 3: red, hengul, yellow, which is called haital, blue, neel, white, korimati, and black, which is called kajal. Interestingly, the primary color palette of the Assamese artists are slightly different from that of the Chitra Sutra of Vishnu Dharmottara, which are white, red, yellow, black, and green. For the calligraphy and writing, the ink called mahi had been prepared from fruits like ink fruit or silica, keheraj, cow urine, blood of the eelfish or kusia, celomic fluid of earthworm, etc., mixed with water. Originally, the Ahoms' ancestral practices to illustrate the manuscripts presumably dates back to the 15th century, as the earliest example of Thai Ahom illustrated manuscript in Assam is the Phungchim manuscript dated 1473 AD. Written in the Thai language, this is a treatise on the Ahom conception of heaven and hell as modified by the animism and Hinayana Buddhism. However, the historical backdrop of the indigenous school of painting in Assam dates back to the 16th century, when the Saint Srimanta Shankardev pioneered the art of the illustrating manuscripts to promote bhakti as a cementing factor. So, deriving its name from the Satra institutions where it flourished, this school is referred to as Satriya school. Drawing its influence from the previous Satriya style, Garhgaon school grew as a new secular school with the essence of court art, portraying fine anatomy, three-quarter profile, portraiture, and naturalistic landscapes. The division of the pictorial space became more prominent with a sense of foreground, layers of contrasting colors. During the glorious period of the Ahom rule, Rudra Singha, supported by his father Gadadhar Singha's consolidations, concentrated on the art activities more vigorously than his predecessors. He sent envoys or ambassadors to visit the contemporary rulers of other parts of India and created special kales called bairagis and counts, whose function was to visit different countries to report the king and the nature of the social and cultural life led there. So his love for this idealistic aristocracy resulted in the practice of wearing Mughal attires in the Ahom royal court along with the Kunmin Kunkha, which is a traditional Ahom attire. Introducing Indo-Islamic instrument like pakhavaj, he conveyed the utmost love for Hindustani music. It was Rudra Singha who initiated the migration of artisan families like the Parshi-Pohiyas or the Akhor-Kotiyas or the Guna-Kotiyas and few others to Assam. The painters basically belonged to a class of people known as chroniclers, and the scribes were called the lekhars. In fact, to manage these artistic activities, the Ahom kings not only patronized and appointed an army of clerks and copyists under the supervision of an officer named Likhak Korporua, but also attached a set of compartments called Gandhiya Bharali for the preservation of these royal manuscripts, records, and letters to the royal palace. The Chronicle Khels were comprised of both local artists from the Satras and the invited Mohammedans from Bhati, meaning from west in the vernacular language. Dilbar and Dosai were the two most celebrated invited artists from Bengal of that period. With the artistic intervention of the invited artists, the pioneering Satriya style gradually eclipsed and developed a new refined idiom with the inclusion of Chakdar, Jama, Mughlai Topi, etc. as a melting pot of both Satriya and imported Muslim, not necessarily Mughal styles. The painted manuscripts of this technique survived from King Siva Singha's reign included Shankachur Vadha, Ushaharana, Hasti Vidyanava, Shastaskanda Bhagavat and Dharmapuran. In the second half of the 18th century, during the reign of Rudra Singha, the Satriya school had been submerged with that of the Garhgaon school. The intrusion of both Satriya and the royal elements became prominent in the work of the artists like Purnakam and Vishnuram Atta of Choliha-Bareghar Satra. In 1767, shortly before the Muamuri uprising, the Adhyatma or Sundara Kanda Ramayana by Purnakam and Ajamed Upakhyan by Vishnuram are such instances where these two parallel styles met at the same focal point, creating a new style with little traces of the Ahom court. It was during the chaos of Muamuriya rebellion, a series of civil war, Burmese aggression and the British aggression, the art of illustrating manuscripts faced a setback. In the year 1833, Rudra Singha was placed as a tributary ruler for a short period by the British government. Despite this adverse socio-political chaos, he commissioned Durgaram Betha to illustrate the Brahma Vaivarta Purana in 1836, which is now a part of the British Library, London. In the year 1841, Rudra Singha again commissioned to illustrate another work, that is the Karna Parva of the Mahabharata. Written and painted by Durgaram Panchanama, the royal priest of the king, the work retained the similar stylistic dynamics of the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. This work is probably the last work belonged to the royal house school executed in the 19th century. Although from the Muamuriya upheaval to the British government ascendancy tremendously affected the Satra circles along with the Ahom royal atelier, the flow of the aesthetic endeavours did not vanish into the vacuum. However, it continued in a preliminary level until the end of the 19th century. From 1836 onwards, the coming of the printing press in eastern Assam, Sadia, paved the way to put the final nail in the coffin to the art of illustrating manuscripts.